Waiting intensifies.
All right, and we are live.
Oh, yes. Oh, I wonder if that made it. Anyway, hello. Welcome to another Nomad Office Hours. And I'm here with Michael Schroeder. Yeah. Okay. I was like, oh, I've never said your last name. I've only said Schmeichel.
I'm Schmeichel to everybody.
And also Chris Baker. Okay, I just messed up everybody's names, so we'll just keep going. And I'm Jackie. I'm one of the developer advocates at HashiCorp, but I'm working on Nomad, evidently. And yeah, if you want to introduce.
Oh, me? All right. Hi, everybody. Michael Schroeder, Schmeichel online and just about anywhere because it turns out there's a lot of Michaels in the world. I'm the team lead for the Nomad team here at HashiCorp. And if you've been around these office hours before, you've probably seen me. And so I'll hand it over to Chris.
Yeah, hi. I've actually done one of these before. In fact, I think it was with Schmeichel. So it's another episode of the Jackie, Chris, and Schmeichel show. But I'm an engineer, the lead engineer on the Nomad ecosystem team. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is my first time doing it with both of you. Eric did the last one, and then my last one was with Nick and James Russell, but that's okay. I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun. So we only got one question so far to start with, so I don't know if we just kind of want to talk a little bit or go through the question first, or while we're waiting for people to join. This is a good one.
This is a good one. Kick it off. We can riff on this one for a while.
Yeah. All right. I have to go find it. I thought I copy pasted it. It turns out I didn't. Where did I put it?
It is in the, here, do you want me to read it?
Yeah, sure. That works.
Okay, cool. So I'll read it and then you answer it. The question is, what are some of the best practices to keep in mind when deploying Nomad to bare metal? Do you run it in VMs, in something like EXSI, PXE boot the nodes, whatever? And the question was specifically about best practices. So I figure we can talk for a little while about all the different things that people actually do. And then we could talk about what best practices would be. But yeah, I mean, all of those things are things that people do, right? So who is it? The customer that runs Nomad on Nomad, right? They pixie boot Nomad or something to get it up, and then they use Nomad to install the right version of Nomad. Is it a 2-level Nomad, or the Nomad upgrades the Nomad or something?
Yeah, this is a fun one. So Roblox has Nomad on Nomad, where there's effectively an infrastructure Nomad that runs the application Nomad. So that's kind of their 2 layers. What's also interesting is Cloudflare had a blog post about their use of Nomad here recently that kind of touched upon this similar question as well, albeit a little obliquely, in which they kind of talk about their configuration management layer, which lives below Nomad. Not sure if that's, something like Puppet, Ansible, Salt, I don't know, any one of those kind of standard configuration management tools, or maybe more of a, cluster management tool, like something like EXSI or something like that. I think it's safe to say that there's a huge variety of solutions out there for kind of the management of the bare metal layer. It's something that we discuss a lot internally too. And in fact, every once in a while we get talking about a HashiCorp Linux distro, but I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. I do think there is one easy answer to this question, or easy part of this question to answer, which is that in, what was it, 0.11.2, we released spread-based scheduling. And so that should be a huge win for people on bare metal. So if you saw the Nomad Under the Hood that I did kind of about our scheduling algorithm, I kind of went into this all into great detail, but to just kind of rehash it briefly, by default, Nomad has a bin packing algorithm. And what that tries to do is use the least number of nodes to run your workload. And so it packs them all as tightly as possible to save you money. The goal there being, if you're running in some sort of elastic infrastructure, whether a public cloud or a private cloud, you can just shut off those machines that you're not using. Now, for a lot of people with bare metal, those machines are just there and you can use them. And so why not take advantage of them? And there may not be a huge power usage differential between bin packing and running some machines hot versus spreading and running all machines low. And you might even get favorable temperature characteristics by using spread in your physical data center. So the spread scheduling feature should be a huge benefit for anybody using bare metal servers, as it should evenly spread the workload across servers. The really fun story there, and definitely go back to the end of the hood if you want to hear the full story. But somebody on the Nomad team, Charlie, just like hacked it together as a proof of concept one day, because it's actually just like a fairly simple algorithmic change. He just kind of on his own inverted the bin packing algorithm, and it turns out that's like exactly an alternative algorithm that Google covered using in their paper that defined the bin packing algorithm that we use. Just kind of stumbled upon that, shipped it as a feature, after testing and polish, obviously. But yeah. So that's the easy part of this question to answer is use spread if you're using bare metal. But as far as how to manage that base layer, I don't know. Chris, do you have any more advice there?
Yeah, the question specifically said deploying Nomad. So it's one thing to use something like this when you're deploying a 1,000-node Nomad cluster. Deploying the Nomad client to 1,000 different machines. The real question is what do you do when it's time to upgrade those machines, right? Are you going to spin up 1,000 new clients? Do you have the capacity, the ceiling to spin up new clients, bring them into the cluster and shut down the old ones? Do you need to upgrade these in place, right? Because if you're doing 1,000 Nomad nodes or 100 or probably even 20 Nomad nodes, you're probably not doing this by hand, in which case you're going to need tooling, not just to get Nomad deployed onto these things, but to operate that later on, to go in and update the Nomad clients, maybe to update the configuration, right? So same thing. I mean, if you have Nomad configuration across all these different clients, are you writing these by hand? Are you SSHing, SCPing them over by hand? Are you, changing the name, changing the metadata on each one of these by hand? Or is there already some sort of automated tool? And is that tool something that is appropriate for going ahead and pulling that Nomad client down and getting it running? I have a small Nomad cluster at home, all bare metal, and I do not run it in a VM. Just to answer that question for one data point. So I run it just on top. So
yeah, and I think HashiCorp, provides tools that will help you in this scenario, but it is definitely kind of like peak Unix philosophy. We don't have like a direct solution for this problem. It's just that you can use our tools to help solve this problem in more generally. And so things like baking the golden image that you distribute via Pixie Boot with Packer would kind of be the first thing to do. And that could be done, like Chris was getting at with, okay, how do you upgrade Nomad if you're running this on bare metal? And one option would be bake Nomad into your golden boot image, kind of distribute that to all of the nodes, on boot. And then to do restarts, you would use the node drain functionality of Nomad to drain the work off of a node or a set of nodes. And once those nodes have drained their work, just rebooting them and letting them pick up, this new image that you've baked. And you can kind of do that at whatever kind of rate is acceptable to you.
I like that, like a rolling restart of your Nomad clients, right?
Yeah. And we, unfortunately right now, node drain is just a single node. We don't allow for kind of doing batches of nodes at a time. That's something I think that would be really nice. Drain in general could use just kind of some observability improvements and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of basically doing a rolling deployment, or even you could even do manual canary deploys that way. Just restarting one client with a new version and letting that kind of soak for a while.
What about running the Nomad client inside of a VM? It seems like there could be some potential gotchas there. I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind is just the ability of the Nomad VM to actually do the virtualization that it needs to do, do the process management, that sort. And then the other one that I'd be a little curious about would be sort of networking snafus that you might run into.
Yeah, I think as well as you always run into the isolating failure domains case when you do that sort of thing as well. So yeah, I think to kind of start tackling these, the QEMU driver would need nested virtualization. It's not one of the more popular drivers. Most people are probably using something like Docker or the exec driver. Those would work fine, in a virtualized Linux, and are probably most commonly used on a VM running Linux. That being said, if you're running Windows, Docker does require nested virtualization. And I'm looking off into space because I'm not sure that's entirely accurate anymore because things change there often. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, there's some OS specific implementation details there that you have to be concerned about for sure. There's the noisy neighbor problem with VMs kind of anytime you're using them, but you really just have to kind of rely on your hypervisor to manage that properly. That's kind of the beginning and end of that story. It works as well as your hypervisor does. But then with failure isolation, one of the tricky things that you would have to manage yourself if you're running VMs on your own bare metal is Nomad naturally uses job anti-affinity to try to make sure that it places multiple instances of the same job. So say you're running the example Redis job. I always use that because type Nomad init and it spits out the example job. You change the count to 6. And so now you're going to get 6 Redises. Nomad automatically tries to put all 6 on different nodes. So it gives you some anti-affinity, and the idea there being we don't want you to lose one node and all 6 of your Redises blow up. You'd be way better off just running one Redis than using more resources on that node. So if you're running on VMs, then you don't get that same failure isolation by default, because you get that failure isolation at the VM layer, but Nomad doesn't know about that underlying physical machine layer. And so that we have a constraint, the distinct property constraint that you can put on jobs to spread them across kind of an arbitrary identifier. And so one that we use in the documentation, I think, is like you can spread by rack. And so if you know what rack each node is in and include that in its configuration, you can make sure you get 1 Redis per rack. And that way, if a rack catches fire, falls down, somebody trips over a cord, insert managing your own data center horror story here. Your other 5 Redises are just fine. They're somewhere else. So you have to, when you're on bare metal, it's not so much an extra burden that you have to worry about, but really you can improve your failure resistance due to this. Because it's not like Amazon and Google and Microsoft don't also have physical machines and physical racks. You just have less visibility into that. So you can really take advantage of that if you're doing it yourself.
The person that asked the question gave some feedback that it sounds along the lines of what they were thinking in terms of a couple of base images, such as console Nomad, the server, the client, and PXE to boot the different kinds of nodes. I was originally typing summary points to be like, all right, just to recap. And about halfway through, I was just like, oh no, I got distracted by the other questions. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess I have a few other questions coming in now. YouTube's getting chatty and it's nice to see. Something else that while we were answering this question that came up was in reference to upgrades. Is there any special tooling or things that we need to do, such as replacing the binary or just restarting the service? I think we might have touched on that a little bit in the middle, but just to kind of give an answer back.
So one of the things that Michael mentioned was node drain. You can certainly go in. I mean, if this is, if you're running out there wild and free, and you've got all your nodes running in a highly available capacity, with spread and affinity and all this other support, so that you're ready for a node to go down at any point in time, then you can certainly shut the Nomad client down and turn it back on again as part of the upgrade. The Nomad client, when you shut it down as long as you're not in dev mode, when you shut it down, it does not turn off your workloads. So one of the mechanisms for upgrading the Nomad client is to just replace the binary and restart it. It'll wake back up. It'll start talking to the server. It'll get a list of allocations. It'll see which ones are still running, and everything's fine. Your services don't go down at all. In fact, you can turn off Nomad on every single node and your services won't go off, right? So that's one way to do it. You can blow the node away entirely, as Michael mentions. Well, that's one of the options. And Nomad will see that the node disappeared, and as long as you had everything running with duplicates, your workloads will be fine. Nomad will schedule extra copies somewhere for you. The safest way to do that is drain, right? Is to go ahead and tell Nomad, please get all the work off of this because I'm gonna blow this node away, but you don't have to. But yeah, that's what I think most people who aren't reusing VMs, who aren't doing, what's the word, immutable infrastructure. They're gonna copy a new, if they're using Terraform or something like that, or some configuration management, they're gonna bring down a new binary and just systemctl restart. And Nomad will wake back up, talk to the server again, and there will be no change at all to the workloads.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like you went into the next question I was going to ask a bit there. But sorry, Michael, go first.
Oh, it's not even important, but I was just reminded. I'm glad Chris mentioned at least twice that you can do in-place upgrades, because while it is a little bit maybe not against, but an exception to our immutable infrastructure and infrastructure as code to kind of do these mutable in-place upgrades of Nomad, we put a lot of effort into making that work and to make sure that once again, talking about failure domains and isolating failure domains, the Nomad agent should be able to blow up without affecting anybody's work. And we put a lot of effort into ensuring that's the case, and into ensuring that you can upgrade clients in place and that they're backwards compatible with what the client was doing before. So by all means, if that works best for you, if that sort of in-place upgrade works best for you, definitely use it. Yeah, I was just reminded of, we had a user once upon a time who didn't know we supported that and was causing themselves all kinds of frustration and pain to go through the step-by-step drain, because they had a very large cluster and it was just taking a lot of tooling and a lot of time. And they didn't even realize that they could do the in-place option. So that's definitely an option, and it's just as well supported as draining and rolling in new clients.
Trying to sort through questions and do what is the most relevant while we're on this path. It's surprisingly difficult because I'm trying to listen to.
Yeah, that next downtime one was good.
The one in the chat that I moved over, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go there then. The next question that we had in sequential order from YouTube was, let's assume our Nomad cluster dies completely. And after that, one of my redundant client VMs, I'm assuming dies too, but I still have one app running and it's available via console. Can I recover without downtime?
So when they say, I'm going to translate that to you, Michael, based on the way I understand that question. I think what they mean is the Nomad cluster, so the management layer is down. So the servers are down, servers are shut down, right? Can't talk to Nomad anymore. But we've got a client, right? And it still has applications that were running on that. So the Nomad client can't talk to the server anymore because they're gone. Maybe the Nomad client's gone too, right? But the workload, is it still up? Console's up, the load balancer's up. The workload, is it still up? Is everything good? Is the app still running? Is it still delivering traffic to the users on the internet?
Yes. The good news is yes. Like I said, your application should be totally safe from Nomad failures. But and so the big caveat here, and it's something that we really hope to improve, is actually once you bring the servers back up, this is when problems can occur. And so what's going on here? Why would that be the case? Why would fixing the problem cause more problems? So what's happening here is Nomad blows up, maybe misconfiguration, maybe bug, whatever. Your Nomad crashes, your servers are down, your client agents are down, but your workloads are still running just fine. They don't know about Nomad. They don't care about Nomad. They're receiving traffic, they're sending traffic. So how do you recover from this situation, regain access to your Nomad cluster without affecting, that uptime of your services? So the tricky thing is that Nomad clients heartbeat to the servers, and the point of that heartbeat is to let the servers know that they're still alive, still running the workloads that they mean to be working. If they stop heartbeating for a certain period of time, they're considered lost. And so a lost client gets its work rescheduled elsewhere. So in the normal sort of circumstances of, a rack catches fire and a bunch of servers die or something like that, those clients go lost. The servers notice that, they reschedule that work elsewhere. Nobody even notices except, hopefully somebody puts the fire out. In this case, since the servers are the ones who are down, along with everything else, things are a little bit more complicated, because when you bring them up, the servers will notice, hey, none of our clients have heartbeated in a very long time. So they're all lost. And so what that's going to do is cause kind of a full cluster rescheduling of allocations, because all clients will have been considered lost and all of their allocations will have been considered lost, even though the services are all still running. And so what you want to do in that sort of scenario is bring your servers back up, make sure that they're healthy, then start bringing your clients back up, and they're just going to be a disaster of rescheduling for a while. Now, that rescheduling should be done in a way that doesn't completely tear down all of your services and spin up new ones all over again. It should be done in an ordered fashion, but it is going to cause just an incredible amount of scheduling churn as the servers reassign things. So we'd like to build some sort of recovery mode in that people could opt into to kind of avoid that unnecessary rescheduling of work that's running happily. But yeah, that's not there yet. And so these sorts of situations are still kind of painful to recover from.
I was like typing, so I wanted to ask a question that's coming up next, but I just pinged in YouTube chat for a little bit more context, because I'm not sure if I'm misinterpreting the question. But I'll come back to that one, because I just pinged them there, like just literally now. So skipping that one for now, and I'll come back. The next question that we had is around volumes and how it's still in beta. When can we expect alpha release or the next version of that to come out?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons that we'll put something in beta, or we'll mark it as beta in a release. We don't do it very often, but a lot of the times, one of the reasons that we'll do that is actually just because we're not sure of the shape of the way you're going to be interacting with it. So I'll pick on the autoscaler. When we released the autoscaler, we put it out as a tech preview, but it used some features that went into the Nomad API around scaling policies and the scaling endpoints. And we marked those as beta. And the reason I did that is because I just wasn't sure 2 months down the road whether we were going to find out that we wanted those APIs to change a little bit for effective use by the autoscaler, or effective specification of scaling policies. And it just seems like, sort of a jerk move to put this out and then in the next release, literally the next release, change the payloads, change the way this goes in there. So usually it's a warning that this is more like it's subject to change than that, you should be scared of it. And storage has a little bit of that. There was a lot of new stuff in the job payload for that, as well as using these CSI plugins. And, as you can imagine, running these community provided CSI plugins inside of Nomad in the appropriate way so that they do the appropriate thing at the appropriate time it was a lot. So having said that, we don't have, unless some of the open issues that we're looking at turn out to be catastrophic, which we probably won't finish looking at those by the time of the 0.12 beta, but we will by the time of 0.12 goes generally available. Unless some of those issues turn out to be catastrophic, and none of them look like they should be. The volume support, this container storage interface support in Nomad is expected to be generally available with 0.12, which is the next release.
That's exciting. Sorry, I'd like to come back and unmute. So I got clarification on the question, and so the original question was, will Nomad have additive rolling update instead of the deductive way of doing it? So I asked for a little bit of clarification, and what they gave was, while rolling upgrade, will we be able to first try to create a new version and then tear down the previous one, versus what Nomad currently does, which is tear down existing instances and then create new ones.
Oh, yep. Yes. This is an old one too, boy. Yeah, we've had people asking for this for a long time, and it's a real shame we haven't gotten to it already. Yeah, so we still haven't planned out that feature. So maybe to rephrase it, because it is a little bit tricky to understand if you're not really familiar with how Nomad already does deployments. So this question is about when you have your Redis example job. Sorry, it's my only go-to. You have your Redis example job. You're deploying version 2 of it. That update stanza in the Redis job kind of controls the deployment, how quickly Nomad rolls it out, whether or not it gets rolled back, the health checks that it does during that situation, how many new versions it puts out at once, whether there's a canary. Okay, all kinds of parameters in these deployments. However, if the Redis group count is 6, so you have 6 allocations, 6 instances of Redis, and you say, I want to deploy 2 new versions at once. So max parallel equals 2. At any given time, you will only have at most 4 instances of Redis running. So what's going on there is that max parallel is actually the max number of instances that Nomad will take down before spinning up kind of a new instance. Now, canaries are additive. We will spin up extra canaries, but that max parallel, if you're not using canaries, will take down nodes. And draining happens the same way. Drain has a max parallel number, the migrate stanza is the job spec stanza that controls how many instances of that job can be taken down while draining. And so it's that same sort of idea, the same max parallel parameter within the migrate stanza kind of has the same effect there. You have 6 maximum Redises. During a drain or during a deployment, you may have down to 4 Redises if that's what you've configured. So the reason why we started with that trade-off is because we wanted you to be able to kind of safely specify numbers that, if you have the resources to run the group count today for your Redis instance, when you go to update it, we don't want you to require to have extra resources just to be able to update it and kind of block you from updating because there's no spare capacity in the cluster. That was one of the original reasons to kind of take this conservative approach. That being said, it should be easier for people to kind of opt into that because it's kind of a common use case to kind of scale out. Kind of the other factor that went into this initial implementation is just that if you have a job of count 1, it's not going to be highly available no matter what. Any given instance of anything can die at any time. So your count for any service you need to be highly available should always be greater than 1. Therefore, if you have your max parallel set to 1 or some number less than your count, hopefully you can keep your services available during updates and deployments. So that's all a lot of context. All of that is not a reason to not offer more options around this. Yeah, and we should.
Yeah, that's a good point about being a block. I think it's worth repeating again, just to make sure that everybody got that. The way it works now, if you do just a straight up, let's ignore canary for a second, because that's only a temporary oversubscription, right? The canaries, you'll go from, say your job's 20. Let's make it more interesting, 20. And you got canary set to 2, right? You want 2 canaries. When you do your update, you're gonna have 22 allocations for a second. 2 of them are gonna be the canaries. As soon as you promote that deployment, those 2 canaries, which are on the new version, get promoted in. Now you got 2 of the new version, you got 20 of the old one, and then it's gonna be a normal rolling update at that. And what, as Michael said, and as the person asking the question the deductive way, we're going to take away some of your existing allocations shrink it, and then grow them back in again. We're going to take away 2 allocations that your job already has, and we're going to turn those into new versions by stopping them, using that to, so it's going to go from like 20 to 18 to 20 to 18 to 20 to 18 to 20 until all the versions have been upgraded to the new version, as opposed to what the question was about, which is I wish to specify a max parallel that's over. Like I want to do 110% rolling update, where I go from 20 to 22 to 20 to 22 to 20 to 22 to 20. And the reason, one of the reasons not to do that is I don't know that I'll have that capacity. If I'm running at 20, I know I have 20, right? I can always get rid of one and upgrade it to the new version. I can't always create a new one. So we'd have to, at the very least, have logic to support that. But one thing that you can do, this isn't a very good answer, you can fake it. If for some reason you want this ability, you always want there to be 3, at least 3. Turn it up to 5. Do your update with max parallel set to 2, and then turn it back down to 3. That's a horrible answer, but that's almost the same thing as an additive rolling update. Yeah. You don't like it.
No,
I was like
waiting.
I was like, are we continuing? Yes, we are. There's a face here.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, Charlie on the Nomad team was asking me if canaries with auto promotion don't solve this entirely. And I think there's still the case of once the canaries are promoted and the deployment continues. If they do solve this completely, it's way more awkwardly than it needs to be. I think just making our rolling deployments allow them to be additive could be a much more straightforward way of accomplishing it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop mentally working through this in front of everyone for now.
But those are fun. So the next question we got was, I tried Nomad last week out of pure curiosity, and the ease and speed of setup was fantastic, which is a compliment. I like those. But I had a question about development workflows. For deploying, particularly local dev, it doesn't seem like you can directly share local network or file system resources, and they have to be done through artifacts or remote sources. And then they had added context of, I used local Artifactory, but it was kind of a pain. How do people set up local dev environments in Nomad for iterative Docker dev workflows that mirror production environments?
You can use volumes. When you run the Nomad, if you just run Nomad agent dev, it runs with sort of the default dev configuration that doesn't have any of this. But you can run in a simple dev mode with support for local client host volumes, which allows you to get data into the containers. But it's just for dev. I don't know if that would necessarily mirror your production environment, because in your production environment, you may or may not be relying on something like client host volumes. But if you just want to get things into the containers without having to use any other hacks for doing that, or without having to actually fetch things down using GoGet or whatever, you can actually just use just tell the Nomad client, hey, here are the volumes that you as a client are aware of for scheduling work to. And then when you run that job, you say, oh, I need that / data volume, or I need that / certificates volume, or whatever it is.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen, we should really have somebody here from HashiCorp come in and talk about how they solve issues related to this, because we use Nomad internally here at HashiCorp, and they've definitely run into this dev staging prod differences issue a lot, and we're super happy to have them available to kind of hopefully refine this, because there's definitely plenty of paper cuts there that we can make better. But one of them that I know I've seen is where you get your Docker images from. You on your local dev machine, you want to iterate rapidly. You want to be able to make changes to the software running inside your Docker container and be able to run that within Nomad without having to push it up to ECR, download it from ECR. Maybe you don't have access to production. There's all kinds of workflows in which in production, the story is fairly straightforward. You have image equals, the name of your Docker image. It gets pulled from your private Docker hub and gets run. Great, straightforward. But how does that translate locally, where you're trying to iterate quickly on this Docker image? And it doesn't translate directly, really, right now in a super easy way. And that's unfortunate, and something that we could definitely improve in core. I think one approach that you can take right now is to have a small difference between dev and prod, where as opposed to using the image parameter for your Docker jobs locally, there's a load parameter that you can give it a Docker image as a tarball directly. And I think you export those from Docker using Docker export. We'll give you the tarball. And so then your development flow has an extra step to it. You do your development, you build the Docker image, you do Docker export to export that image as a tarball, and then you put that tarball into that load statement in your job file that you're using for local deployment. If that all feels good locally, then you push that code up. That code in your application gets, goes through CI, goes through CD, and hopefully that CD pipeline spits out a new Docker image into your ECR or whatever your private Docker repo is. And then your production Nomad job points to that image. So it's unfortunate that there's that, extra bit of work you have to do locally, and that difference between dev and prod. And it would be nice to fix, especially because I think fixing it would mean Nomad would take more control over image retrieval. And I think that's something that could have a lot of usability improvements in general.
This is funny. I was on a call last week with somebody from the Terraform Cloud team that runs their Nomad clusters. And they had run into a couple of issues because they decided to start using, we're using Artifactory, I guess. And that's where the blessed images go for a lot of the stuff they're doing, I guess. And I don't think I'm talking about anything confidential. Anyway, but yeah, that's where the Docker images were going to be. And Artifactory, if you've used it before, in addition to being a general binary artifact, also has a Docker registry built in because people want that. And they'd ran into some issues getting that configured. Whatever, private registry, everything. But one of the things that they weren't aware of that I pointed out was that Nomad has the ability to run Docker images from a tar file. So in addition to being able to tell the Docker daemon to do a Docker pull, Nomad will actually let you use an artifact stanza to pull down the tar file, and then it'll load it on the client into the Docker registry to use for you, which is a nice little hack that can occasionally be super useful as a get out of jail free card sometimes. So just something I was thinking about as you were talking about that just now.
Yeah.
So they did confirm that, I forget when it was, but when we moved to talking about the Docker registry parts and how to get that, they confirmed that that was exactly the problem that they were asking about. And then just followed up saying, okay, so I can pack the image into a .tar and then load from local. And for remote, use whatever remote repository / registry. Sounds solid, thank you.
Great, and also we love GitHub issues. I don't know if there's a good one capturing this or not. But yeah, the most helpful kind of GitHub issues that we get a lot of times are these ones that, could really lay out a workflow that's bad. Being like, look, I'm trying to develop using your Docker driver, the most common driver, and I have to do all these extra steps locally that I don't have to do in production, gross. That's really helpful feedback, especially because these sorts of things that people using Nomad have to do multiple times every day when using Nomad, are different than the sorts of things that Chris and I do every day with Nomad. So it's super helpful feedback.
There was an interesting question I was Googling around for issues while you're talking about that. And somebody had one of these dev versus prod type of issues. Like, I've got a job. I just did Docker build on my laptop. I just typed it. It already exists on the in the Docker daemon. Docker's aware of it. How do I get Nomad to use that image without actually trying to pull it from somewhere? So that's yeah, there are some good issues up there for that one.
Yeah.
And then an additional note I was asked to add when we were talking about the dev configuration earlier was a lot of folks don't realize that you can configure a dev node with additional configuration by creating a configuration file with the specific elements you need, and then starting that node with -dev and -conf flag. There we go, I made it. And this lets you leverage the ephemeral node state you get in a dev instance with advanced configuration. So just an add-in.
That's a great one. Yeah, I use that one a lot. Things like TLS, when testing TLS, I use that. Vaults, console, custom console configurations. Yeah, love that feature. That's a great one to call out.
Okay, I was just skimming. I was like, am I missing any questions there? So the next question we got was Nomad versus K8s. So I asked if there's something that they're, I know, I'm sorry. I asked if there's something that they're more interested in learning specifically. And they said, what would be the right reason for me to choose Nomad over K8s? Or Kubernetes, my bad. So I guess what use cases would you recommend? Yeah.
Do you want to take a first swing at it, Chris?
Yeah, you know, scale, speed, plugins, integration with the HashiStack. I mean, there's 4. Do you want to expand on those? I'll try to think of some more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, integration with the HashiStack is probably the most common one we run into. Is people love console. If you're already using console, Nomad is really easy to slot in. And so what a lot of people do is they'll have console around, and maybe they'll start using Nomad because they need, everybody has batch workflows, have some, you know, weird little queue processing system off somewhere. Nomad's a great way to run those. And then if you're already using console internally, hey, they can also, you know, connect to your services, whether they're running in Kubernetes or on bare metal or whatever they're doing. So so that's a great way to get started with Nomad. Similarly with Vault, I think I'll stay positive. I think our Vault story is really good. I think yeah, I would love people who aren't familiar with Nomad. You know, it's a I wish the HashiStack was easier to set up, and we're definitely putting work into making it easier to set up. We're definitely, you know, we would love for it to be a push button sort of situation where you can get a full HashiStack, not just Nomad, you know, really up and running quickly and easily. So we'll get there. But in the meantime, if you can stand up a Vault and a console and a Nomad all together, I think you'll really enjoy the integration between Nomad and Vault. I think the security features are frankly, you know, really, if not best in class, have some really compelling features. We're missing service accounts for your individual allocations, for your individual instance of services. We're going to get there. We're going to add those. And yeah, I think that's a really great story. So I would say the because you like HashiCorp reason is one we see often. The performance one is great, especially for batch workloads. You should be able to throw, you know, thousands of new job submissions a second at Nomad without problem. Let us know if you can't. The scaling properties should be pretty straightforward to monitor and to manage. Nomad keeps its state persisted on disk, but all of its working state is in memory. So monitor your CPU, monitor your memory, monitor your network bandwidth, and you know, when those things start maxing out, scale up your instances.
Yeah, that's local
servers.
That's local in memory. It's not talking to some etcd service that you're also having to run, right?
Right. So so the scaling story should be great. Should be straightforward about how you approach it. You know, the way that you react to you know, running out of resources. Hopefully you can scale up those instances. If you can't scale up those instances any more, then you know, you might have to split clusters, in which case then we have cluster federation that just works and is open source. So we really strive to have a really good scaling story from, you know, very small double-digit number of nodes to, you know, 5-digit numbers of nodes.
I think the cluster federation is worth emphasizing just a little more. Like cluster federation has been a part of Nomad for how long now? I mean,
so I think 0.4, which was 100 years ago or so. Yeah.
Yeah, so this means set up a Nomad cluster over here, set up a Nomad cluster over there, and you run what? One command. And now that you've got cluster federation, and it's not just, I mean, this is scalable cluster federation. It uses an entirely different protocol that was purpose built for allowing these things to effectively, it uses a gossip protocol so that they can be aware of all the different things they need to be aware of so that they can run these clusters. And, you know, we have people who are running dozens of clusters all over the world. And you can talk to any client, any node, anywhere, and just say, hey, I want to run a job, run it in Europe. It doesn't matter which one you're talking to, and it's going to get over there. And the cluster federation story has always been good with Nomad, and there are features that we're adding to that that you're going to be hearing about later. So there's upcoming. We're continuing to add support, build on top of that cluster federation story, and Kubernetes. You know, it's something that they've just it's just been an ongoing thing there. So if cluster federation is something you're interested in, or maybe interested in the future, you should look and see whether that might tip you one way or the other.
And just, yeah, we don't have to spend the rest of the time on this, but Chris did make me think of too, we really strive for a really good compatibility story with Nomad as well. So not only have we had federation for a long time, but it hasn't really changed in a long time. Our APIs get things added to them, but we put a lot of effort into trying to be backwards compatible, into carefully documenting, you know, anytime we break that backwards compatibility, carefully providing intermediary releases where we, you know, deprecate a feature and say, you know, get off of it where it's moving to this feature in the future. We put a lot of effort into that. And in fact, kind of going back to the beta question from way earlier, that was really new ground for us. And we were pretty nervous about shipping beta features and tech preview features and that sort of thing, because we really strived to not ship something until it was ready, because we wanted to support it forever. As we grew and as the community grew, we kind of learned that for some of these larger features that are a little harder to define, especially for us to just kind of define in a vacuum without getting validation from users, we didn't want to do that anymore. You know, we wanted to be able to ship something and say, okay, this might change. We're not giving you this great compatibility guarantee we've always given, but we want to get it in your hands. We want to let you play with it. We want that feedback because we can make changes right now, and we can make changes without surprising people. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of been a pretty big shift here in the last few months or few releases for Nomad, but we'll probably do that more because we've gotten just such great feedback on these really complex and subtle features like CSI, auto scaling, that sort of thing. But in general, boy, code you wrote against Nomad 2-3 years ago should keep working today. You know, your job spec from 2-3 years ago probably should just keep working today. We put a lot of effort into backwards compatibility. And so you should be able to pay as little attention to Nomad as you want.
I have thoughts. Usually I just ask questions, but I'm like, I got thoughts on this space. I worked with Kubernetes for 2 years, coming from a healthcare background. And we had a mix of Kubernetes products that need to integrate with products that were in hospitals, which are, you know, not as up to date, but also our own in-house ones that were across different VMs. So the two things for me that if I could go back and change to Nomad, the reasons I would have, number one, was that compatibility between our brownfield applications and our greenfield was just so hard. It was different clouds across different data centers, and it was a very, very difficult thing to do. The second reason is actually somebody commented about Kubernetes security, and I was like, I got thoughts, so here's my thought. Again, I came from healthcare, so it's a much more restrictive background. And one of the biggest problems that we had with trying to get compliant near the end of it was trying to get the networking policies to work properly. So this was a lot of, you know, you had to deploy it every time to get it working in Kubernetes. And if something didn't work, the whole product was down. So this was a lot. Actually, joining HashiCorp, the talk I did was about console and how I wish I'd known about console, because I could have just tweaked those settings in the UI and then actually, you know, they could have communicated. So it's a bit of a Nomad and a bit of a console story. But yeah, that would be my main reason to go back, is if you have a use case where you need those very distinct, different settings. Yeah.
Michael made a comment earlier about how we wish it was easier to set up the Hashi stack, right? Because you could have set up Vault. You'd probably set up console first, set up Vault, and then you're going to set up Nomad. And there are things you can do in between to make it easier. Nomad can find Nomad using console, and Vault can use console as the back end. And anyway, but you know, there's a lot of, you get to do all of that, right? When you have to do it, but when you're doing it, you are setting up the configuration for all of that, so you know what it's doing. It's not automating all this stuff. You have the ability, you get to follow the best practice guides for how to set up your vault and how to secure your vault, so you know that your vault is running secure, independent of what you do with your console and your Nomad. And you get to make these decisions and customize these things for your environment. One of the next questions is about multi-tenancy in the HashiCorp stack. And the question is, how do I achieve it using Nomad, console, and Vault? Well, the easy answer for that is that there's a lot of ways you can do it. And that's one of the interesting things, right? Do you want to have one vault, multiple nomads, one nomad, multiple vaults? Do you want to have, how do you want to do your console? Do you want to have multiple nomad regions, clusters? There's just a lot of flexibility here. That's one of the, you know, that the Unix philosophy about one tool for one job, it cuts both ways, right? It means you have these tools and you can use them to build whatever it is you need to build, whatever's appropriate for your environment, your organization. But at the same time, it means you have to build it, right? So, yeah. I don't, so to that question, actually, how to achieve multi-tenancy on the HashiCorp stack using Nomad. Console and Vault, all three of them support namespaces. So I can't speak, I'm not very read in on Vault and console namespaces, but with Nomad, all of the ACLs, a lot of the ACLs are actually written at the namespace level. This isn't a big deal if you're using open source without namespaces, but when you're using namespaces in the enterprise Nomad, you can, namespace is one of the easiest ways to set up multi-tenancy, right? You can set up a namespace, you can hand people ACL tokens that only have access to that namespace. They can't see, touch, smell things in other namespaces. And your multi-tenancy is taken care of right there. So that's one way to do it with Nomad.
Okay. Sorry, I was like furiously typing on the side. I think we're going to start winding down because we're running out of time slowly. Some of the feedback that we got in YouTube was that one of the hardest things about getting onto Nomad was the lack of tutorials for them to be able to get started with. And so some discussion around that. And as the HashiCorp account came in to leave a link, we do have learn.hashicorp.com/nomad. I'm going to post this after. So we have lots of guides there. And one of the really big things about this is that we're always looking for your feedback, what you're getting stuck on, what things you need to learn for us to help build the next guide, because we want to solve the problems that you're having. So please, please, please leave us GitHub issues or discuss questions or requests for these guides so that we can help build things to help you out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, we love GitHub issues. Yeah, and we're actively trying to figure out how to improve just kind of our community collaboration and communication efforts. Definitely, it's yeah, we have a great community. We have a lot of great things going on. It's really hard to kind of keep track of and tie all the strings together. So hopefully we'll have some news on that front here someday soon too.
And then some of the other feedback we're getting in channel is talking about the different types of ways you can learn. So kind of more like those instructor-led videos. And on that note, do I have some news for you? We're also going to be doing workshops at HashiConf, specifically Nomad workshops. I'm going to drop the link in chat right now. But the ones that we have are how to secure your Nomad jobs with Console Connect, how to secure your Nomad cluster, and deploying the Nomad UI in production. I'm not sure. I think all of us might be involved in those workshops. I'm not actually sure. Yeah, okay, confidently. So we'll be here to help you learn that. Again, if you have requests, please, please, please let us know. I'm just going to share my link. And if you have thoughts, go forth.
And when is that? Is that next week, the week after?
That's June 22nd.
Oh, okay, cool. So that's coming up.
We've got some really exciting stuff coming up too. We've got Nick and James Rosell, who were on my last office hours, are both going to be doing their own talks too. We've got, my team has been working very hard on this really exciting keynote that we cannot wait to share with everybody, but we definitely can't talk about yet. And I think there's going to be some really fun, exciting stuff getting announced. I think that's as far as I can tease without saying too much more. I don't know if either of you have any other thoughts, shares.
I gotta bite my tongue too. A lot of exciting stuff going on. A lot of people doing incredibly hard work. Yeah, it's an exciting time. Yeah, I know we have an ambitious roadmap. There's lots of things like we've talked about today that we're trying to get to. But yeah, I think with every release, you'll see really exciting things happening.
I've reached a character limit on YouTube. Today I learned. So I'm struggling with that a little bit here. Nope, that's still too much. Sorry, apparently I can't talk and think of writing comments at the same time.
No worries. Yeah, let's see. So yeah, there's learn.hashicorp.com, there's discuss.hashicorp.com, and then there's HashiConf Digital is coming up, which is our replacement for HashiConf EU because of the state of the world. And that is free registration, right? Everybody can just go sign up and go watch whatever they want to watch.
It is free. Oh, I forgot to mention that part. It's free.
Yeah, that's the best part. HashiConf EU wasn't free. This is free. Yeah. So people can join, and yeah, we'll have to keep doing stuff like this too, definitely. So
Go to both HashiConfs this year without having to get on a plane.
My first. But I think it'll be really good. I'm really looking forward to it. I think everything I've seen internally is everybody's really excited. There's lots of prep going on as we get ready to do this, and we just really want to deliver like the best virtual event that we can in terms of staying on brand with what people have come to expect from Hashi conferences. Yeah. I thought I'd have less than 3 minutes, so maybe we could have fit another question in. Whoops. What is your, oh, I have a question. What is the talk that you're both looking forward to the most that you've seen coming up at the conference?
I haven't looked at the schedule yet, so I can't say for sure. But I am excited. James Rosell from the ecosystem team is going to be giving a talk on the autoscaler. And what's the Q&A situation for HashiConf?
Ooh, hard questions. I think that we're going to be taking it, we'll be taking live Q&A as far as I know. I'm like not really sure what I can or can't say, and I'm not the most informed on that section of it. So
auto-scaling talks are fun, and I would recommend you watch it because it's well, I like the Nomad autoscaler, but also they're just the most fun because people come in with just the most out there questions. Like all of the use cases around autoscaling are awesome. So I'd tell you, I'm looking forward to that one because I want to see James's talk again, but also just because I just love the Q&A that follow talks on autoscaling.
Okay, then I can talk about Nick's without playing favorites, and we'll have covered both Nomad talks. So yeah, Nick on the Nomad team is going to be giving a talk, like Jackie said, on networking, which if you were at HashiConf Digital, HashiConf EU last year, is when he presented our bridge networking and console connect integration, and then went above and beyond and even demonstrated how console connect gateways can even link together networks across the internet and things like that. Yeah, so that was super exciting stuff. I not to put too much pressure on him, but I'm looking forward to seeing what other super exciting stuff he has for us this year. Yeah, I know he's hard at work, and I think the Nomad, and this, see, we're gonna chew up the rest of the time really easily now. You got me talking again. This really ties back into that Kubernetes question we had earlier, where one of the biggest differences between Kubernetes and Nomad has always been Nomad has taken a fairly hands-off approach to networking. Kubernetes has a very kind of well-defined networking model, whereas Nomad kind of leaves it up to you and just kind of exposes the network as you would natively see it on the host or for that task driver. And I think what you're going to see in Nick's talk and in Nomad 012 is us, finally filling in some gaps in our networking, and that should be pretty exciting and kind of offer a much more flexible story for either people who want more of the overlay network, or those sorts of things that get you the same sorts of kind of behaviors as Kubernetes networking, or not, and just kind of support more kind of host level complex networking setups, both through things like CNI plugins, and then we'll see what else. But yeah, it should be really exciting.
I'm looking forward to it. I've done content check-ins with both of them, and I'm just like, this looks so good. I can't wait to share. I did get clarification on Q&A. Thank you for coworkers who are watching, and helpful, very helpful, actually. That sounds sarcastic, it's not. Anyway, so we will be doing Q&A. It's going to be chat-based, and there will be more details on the conference platform that we'll be using coming out either this week later or next week. So stay tuned. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming on to Office Hours with me. Thank you to everyone who came out. We had very high engaged chat. This was great. I loved it. So yeah.
All right.
Just kind of tailed off there, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks everybody who watched and participated.